can't check into a hotel room without scanning the QR code for the menu these days. So if that can be subverted, that's a problem.
Let's just say a certain video platform, the nation state, using it as a mechanism to distract and dumb down the population.
People doing it for money, are they doing it for ideology, are they doing it because they're being coerced, or are they doing it just because they've got an ego? Demonstrating how information security is very equitable with site safety. Of course, we've seen every vendor in the world has now got an AI component.
The bigger challenge, I think, for everybody is getting that buy.
The human's the weak point of all security models, but they're also the first line of defense.
Hello, and welcome to Threatcast, a podcast by Threatscape, where we chat about all things cyber. My name's Paul O'Sullivan, I'm the UK Sales Director, and in today's episode, we'll be discussing what it's like to get the board bought into good cybersecurity practices. In today's episode, I'm joined by an old contact or friend, Jim Griffiths. Some of you may know him, but I'll let him introduce himself. Jim, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I think you and I first met, crikey, when would it have been? 2007, 8-ish maybe? Back in the days we were bringing Yodel to life. But yeah, I'm Jim Griffiths. I'm currently Head of Information Security at Associated British Foods. And for the last 35 years now, crikey, I've been working in information security, first 16 years with the military, serving with the Royal Air Force Police, and then lastly, the last 20 years working my way through management up to the lofty heights of CISO, my previous role with the Care Group, construction company based in the UK, covering UK and lots of Europe and whatnot. And then, the move to food manufacturing and ingredients a couple of years ago, back in 2020. Gainfully employed today and very much on the front foot in all things cyber.
And obviously, we know each other, as you've said, going back some time, but I guess digging into that a little bit for the benefit of the audience. Served time in the Royal Air Force. Walk me through the step into civvy world and, more importantly, into cybersecurity. How did that come about?
Yeah, so thankfully, the military offered me a good career as a policeman. And I started that in the late 1980s, where I think the biggest role we got at the time was nuclear weapons security. So did a couple of years on that and then got promoted and had to make a choice on how I specialised. We had two choices. You either went down the CID style route, nicking villains, put them in jail, prosecuting, that kind of thing. Not interested. The SIB world, Special Investigation Branch world, wasn't for me. I selected the sexier title, Counterintelligence, not quite knowing what that was, but it introduced me to this world of information security. Back in the day when it was all on a piece of paper, on a file, in a safe, in a registry, before computing. And then along came computers, the mainframes we'd always had, but we certainly didn't have them at a desktop level. So that was my kind of entry into computer security at the time, as it was called, but largely looking after all of the classified sensitive material related to operations, equipment, all of that good stuff that we carry over into business today. And in 2003, I managed to hurt myself to a point where I couldn't continue my career, so I had to leave. Just embarked on my master's degree that the RAF was paying for with the University of Westminster. So I was given time to complete that. And then I was medically discharged from the Royal Air Force, thinking, my God, how do I bridge the gap now? I've got 16 years under my belt. Are my skills transferable? And thankfully, it's the IT security that was a transferable skill set. But I didn't look for a job. One of our MOD suppliers rang me up, said, "We hear you're leaving. Do you fancy coming to have a chat?" So I moved off to consult with them for a while, for a couple of years, before I was then enticed into the world of security management with a company that provided a lot of banking level insurance to your current account. You pay your £10 a month for your current account. The banks have to offer you some services for that money. And one of them was Tech Protect Insurance. So I joined the insurance division of Phones for You back in the day and embarked on my managerial career henceforth. And then every kind of 3-4 years kind of moved up the chain from manager to director into CISO. And then just moving laterally then to come into AB Foods via British Sugar in 2020, and then moving into the operational centre space back in 2022. So I've been there 2.5 years now, looking after the security operations centre and very much owning that operational environment and freeing up the CISO to concentrate on the C-suite and the daily politics that managing a big old business kind of brings to life.
And it's almost like you setting this next question up for me, because it segues quite nicely into very much that the challenge, which is the point of this podcast, or this strain of podcast, as it were, and getting that buy-in. Because for my mind, the tech bit is a challenge in and of itself, and maintaining compliance, of course, but the bigger challenge, I think, for everybody is getting that buy-in. So I'm kind of interested in maybe some examples of that, whether it's way back in the phones for you, the insurance piece, obviously you dealt with, we met, or any of the others for that matter, where you've gone into that organisation and there's almost been this indifference or devil-may-care attitude towards what we now call cybersecurity, information security or IT security as it was. Any examples of that where you kind of had that kind of what?
Yeah, so certainly the move into management with the phones for insurance gig, that was largely driven by the people that they served. So they served all of the high street banks, and the banks themselves have said, look, you need somebody with this kind of profile to come in to manage your information security because we're giving you customer data, right? And that's vital to us. It's our lifeblood. So they actually put a profile together that then Lifestyle Services Group, that then stepped to market and sourced against. And that's kind of followed. So when I moved to Yodel kind of 4 years then down the line, it was being split out of Shop Direct Group to be stood up and the brand created. And same kind of deal, when you're delivering for big retailers, they're giving you customer data. And again, they want to make sure that the security of that information is appropriate. So bringing somebody that can be the single point of contact, operate at a senior level, advise and guide, the senior stakeholders, the top level boards on what those requirements are, how to operate and execute against them, but do it in a way that makes sense with the business objectives very much front of mind as well. It's kind of where I've earned my spurs and have seen that kind of move every 4 years or so to more senior, more responsible positions. And I think the style that I've applied in each of those engagements is not a subservient one, which quite often when you move from the military to civil sector, you're very rank conscious, depending on where you were in the military organisation, but you're just part of doing business now. And you're the subject matter expert, just as a finance director or a HR director is the subject matter expert in their environment. And it's being able to understand the business objectives, the business language, and putting across what quite complex problem statements into bite-sized chunks that are solvable problems that continue to move that business forward appropriately, and face into the no end stakes of security, that kind of perspective and the emerging threats and vulnerabilities of the day.
Interesting you say that, breaking it into bite-sized and understandable. So, I mean, perhaps I'll pick Yodel as an example, and obviously, we're able to I guess, explain or share. In my mind, yes, there's customer data in there, but I guess as an organisation, whilst there's the data protection side, but equally there's probably a load of kits. And I'm saying this now that we did some work together, getting the management to actually make the correlation between data over here, you need to fix this stuff here to protect this data here, otherwise, everybody has a bad day and all over the ICO or something. Can you give maybe some examples of where you started to help them make that correlation, those bite-sized chunks as you described? I'm particularly interested in trying to tease some of that.
Yes, I remember having a very good conversation with a chap called Jonathan Smith that was the chief exec of Yodel back in the day. Because it had been split out of Shop Direct, it was very, very focused on physical security, delivering goods essentially around the country. And I joined off the back of these retail organisations saying, no, you need somebody in information security as well. So I remember sitting in a three-way meeting with Jonathan and with Andy, the physical security director, and just talking about all of these crown jewels that the business had. We'd got not just customer data for retailers, but the retail channel information, our own information as well. The kind of the crown jewels in the business, whether it was our employee data, whether it was our profit and loss, whether it was our financial performance, because we're privately owned and we're held accountable by private equity to perform. So bringing all of that into the conversation concluded with Jonathan saying, I don't get why we've not done this before, and it was all based on just creating the bite-sized chunks, not talking about cyber, not talking about threats and vulnerabilities, but just talking about regulatory environments, the legal statutes that we've all got to comply with wherever we are. Bringing that into our business ways of working and our operating models, understanding where the critical points were and what capabilities we had today and where the gaps are, but then providing an assurance that we'd close out the gaps, and we can't do that overnight. It's going to take time. It may take investment, depends on the capabilities that we've got, but just really bringing a kind of a seat to the table that can then talk about doing business appropriately with information security very much front and centre in the conversation to demonstrate the quality of the business and to give those customers and retailers and clients the confidence that we're the right partner for them. That's then maintained rolling forward, no matter where we've operated. So if you think that was logistics, I've done insurance, I've done some of the critical national infrastructure projects. It's the same principles applied, and I've applied them for 35 years now, and they were probably brought to life in the 1980s, but they're still relevant today despite the legal and regulatory environmental changes.
I mean, the way you describe it when we often chat, it sounds like you're talking at a business level and then trying to bring across and correlate any elements of tech that might need considering or process, whatever it may be. Whereas I get a sense oftentimes people have perhaps tried to jemmy the board of the individuals into understanding tech speak. Is that a reasonable description, would you say?
Very much. I think the point I would make here is that all of this is learned behaviour. Right, I certainly didn't get into business knowing all of this stuff now, not 20 years down the line. It's about understanding what works and what doesn't, And I remember going into a chief exec in one place, and I'd been asked to look at operational risk off the back of something we'd done around information risk. And I and the compliance director played back this risk register to the chief exec, and he just ripped it up, physically ripped up the paper product we put in front of it. And I was aghast, oh my God, my career's in tatters. I've done all right today, but this has not gone the way I thought it was going to go. Why not? And he said, Jim, you've got to understand we're in an entrepreneurial business. Risk is my reward. So it's great that you can track my operational risks, and thank you for that. But I'm not interested in seeing the register because I will chase whatever risk I feel is relevant. Wow. Big learning moment, right, in your career when everything else to date had been relatively, steady state, rinse and repeat. But you move from a kind of a regulated business to an unregulated business to an entrepreneurial business. And by golly, are they different environments to operate in?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I cast my mind back to, I was at an event working for a SIM vendor. It's one of these, what we call speed dating, where you go and do the talk, so then the likes of yourself and sort of client side are forced to sit in front of some sales droid like me and listen to
those events we love so much. I get it.
Yeah, I could just tell this guy this look of like complete deflation stuff. I just said to him, I'm not even about to try to picture how's the show been, what's it been like. You've been made to come here. Let's just dispense with that. We got on quite early with the head of IT at Summerfield, and we got talking about risk and PCI and all the rest of it, and then obviously the point of acceptable risk. And he said, well, the thing he said, along comes MasterCard and Visa or whatever saying we must do X, Y, and Z. We've got this planned refresh project next year that's already scheduled for £6 million. If they're going to find us 250 grand, so be it. We'll take that risk because we're not going to bring that forward when it's going to interrupt our cash flow. So they can take it or leave it. And if they don't like it, then we'll just stop accepting MasterCard and see where we go there because it'll hit them more than it hits us.
Yep.
And that was one of my moments of realization that, this is the business taking a business view on it. So all these vendors hawking their wares, completely wasting their time. Oh, you must do this because of PCI and you're a retailer. Yeah, join the queue.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and obviously the big one where, I saw real change there for me was when you were in Kia. I remember the famous conversation, the very reason I'm sitting here myself today. We'll go on to that another time. But driving that because organisation with massive technical debt, I'm sure a myriad of people who weren't necessarily bought into the importance of technology, let alone good security practices. Can you give maybe some examples of some of the challenges there, or where you've managed to reach a tipping point and got somebody to have that light bulb moment?
Yeah. So I think joining Kia, I joined Kia through acquisition. I was with a business that got bought by, and I was invited down on a Friday afternoon to have a conversation with the Kia CIO, chap called Duncan Stott. And Duncan invited me down. Of course, I drove all the way down from Staffordshire to Bedfordshire, thinking Friday afternoon in a business that's just been bought. I've done all of this great due diligence over the last 6-8 months. I know what this conversation is, right? It's going to end up with an envelope and me coming back up the M6, muttering, because I've just been let go. And I arrived and Duncan introduced himself, introduced the company, and then said, look, mate, I'm looking for a head of information security at the minute. You've done all this really good work through the acquisition. Do you fancy joining me? Wow. Rocked back at that point because this is not the conversation I'm expecting. Working with Duncan, probably the single biggest career change I've had because he treated me as a partner, to come in and add a skill set that they didn't have. They've got a couple of contractors doing kind of commodity information security, policies, procedures, that kind of thing. But Kia is one of these businesses that is involved in UK critical infrastructure itself. It builds stuff. So all of the key government level projects all need a named security manager. It's got to be cognizant of the built asset security space. There's a whole discipline that comes from designing and then building infrastructure. So I suddenly found myself kind of put in front of the senior operational guys. We had a couple of CIOs, one to look after business services and BPO, and one to look after the more traditional construction. I think we had a third at one point that looked after housing. And you're in front of these guys that all want to know what they've got to do in terms of security at a physical level and an infosec level, and you're the guy that we've just hired because we bought the company and you've now got the gig. Duncan's looking after the IT, you're looking after the security. How's it going to work as a part doing business? Duncan and I are partners. He is the chief information officer and I'm your information security officer. And over the course of the next 2 years, I was set some objectives to grow the head of role into a CISO role, to face into the kind of the top level board environments there, and work with everybody from group council across the operational spaces into the back office, head office spaces, every level of the organization. So yeah, it's I often find you join these businesses and you look at who they are and you do your research and how they present themselves. You get behind the scenes and they're a much, much bigger, more complex beast than you thought. You've underestimated. So, my first kind of 3-6 months then always becomes I've got to learn the business. Got to learn what works, what doesn't, what language they use, what I mustn't use. When can I push a message and inform people of what needs to be done? When do I need to just back off a little bit and recognize that we're already doing something in this space? So I just need to support. And then equally, every now and again, crises happen. So how do we lead businesses through events to ensure that we've got a business recovery model that's achievable and capable, and then just make sure that in the 2017-18 want to cry and not pet you moments, we batten down the hatches, survive, and then thrive the other side of it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you made there about understanding the business and the language and the people. I mean, we've covered other guests I've had and we've touched on other things they've done that's not been brought to the forefront yet. I mean, we have to do that as salespeople to try and figure out to drive success to hopefully, if we are in the frame for supplying something to ensure our success in doing so. And I do often joke whether CISOs and maybe even IT leaders could benefit from working with salespeople in some of those approaches. But what you've said there seems to validate that. I mean, what was your observation in there then, again, without throwing anybody under a bus or making comments that might be libelous or other such? I mean, did you find the appetite was pro? Was it kind of neutral? Was it indifferent? Was it anti making that investment? Where did it sit overall?
So definitely cautious on investments, because when you're dealing with a lot of infrastructure projects, they're largely run as businesses in their own right. So the project has its own budget, its own profit and loss, and that aligns kind of then into a division and then into the wider business. So I remember sitting in front of construction site managers in porter cabins with computer systems, portable and fixed, kind of making sure they'd got the right things to comply with what the customer was asking, what the government was asking, and then taking that message back to the customer. I found a bit of a secret to success because my first couple of months, nobody was like, what are you even doing here? IT is a head office thing. We've got our IT, it just works. And it was about bringing them through the contractual level obligations that we'd engaged against and demonstrating how information security is very equitable with site safety. So you're operating in a safe way, you're looking after the information. The designs, nobody wants the designs to be leaked to an attacker or the wrong party, because we worked on some very, very secure sites, and equating it to safety was a common denominator, which worked well. Equally, when I then went back into the C-suite and promoted conversations there, entirely different lens, entirely different language. It's not the local language of a construction site, which can be quite fruity. This is now a bit more corporate. And I think the best conversation I ever promoted there, we did a tabletop exercise with the C-suite around an event. And the trigger for the event was, data being leaked or lost, the day before we were about to announce results to market. And the CFO said, well, what on earth do we do, Jim? And I said, well, we've got chief counsel here, we've got the corporate comms director, we've got the CIO, we've got the operating officers. This is very much a head office thing, right? It's a stakeholder thing for the shareholders. So we need to know what we're telling them. That's got to be the key message, because we can't produce the information tomorrow at 8 a.m. that we're meant to do. Well, actually you can, because the release to markets is the end of a process, not the start of a process. But I remember the comms director saying, "Oh my God, we've got to get this message out. It's got to be this, that, and the other." And Chief Counsel said, "No, absolutely not. Tell no one nothing ever. We've had a thing. We don't quite know what that thing is. So what are we telling people?" And the CFO went, "Well, what do we do?" I said, "Well, we let this conversation happen because we've got to find a midpoint, right? We can't hide the fact we've had a problem. But when we report it, we're reporting a plane crash, a really technical incident that makes a plane fall out of the sky is analogous to this situation. It's a technical problem with a clear result that we can't give the shareholders the information tomorrow morning. So what are we going to go with a holding message for? And is it going to be done under NDA? Is it going to be done publicly? We're not, we're shareholders. We're a publicly listed business. We've got fiduciary responsibilities. We've got legal responsibilities. Yeah. So all of that's got to factor into your thinking. And that one conversation, I think, cemented the reason that I got the gig. Information security was absolutely critical to the organisation. And when the balloon goes up and you've got to respond appropriately, you need somebody advising and guiding. It's never going to be the guy that's talking to the press. But it's going to be the guy behind the scenes or the girl behind the scenes, guys, that androgynous term I help these days, the folks behind the scene, let's settle on that. It's a bit Wizard of Oz. You've got to be behind the curtain, steering, pushing, cajoling, steering, knowing that the people that do then have to do the front-facing stuff have to be as well informed as they can be, but not over-report.
Interesting you say that. And how did the tabletop exercise come about? Was it something you instigated? Was it something they instigated? Or
So Duncan was very much cognizant of not having done one before. Through the communities I'm a member of outside of my professional career, kind of been involved in that world for about 20 years or so through various focus groups and special interest groups. And Duncan had come along to one of these sessions. He'd seen kind of what was being adopted in the security industry. Came back in straight away and said, "I've been chatting with my boss, the CFO, and we think it's a really good idea if we run this tabletop exercise because we've never done one before, Jim. How might it work?" So we kicked the problem around the room for an hour or so, come up with a strategy and a plan. The tabletop exercise is a tabletop exercise. We'll have some principles. It's a safe to fail space. You can put your hand up and say, "I just don't know. I don't know what to do next here," because it's a training environment. And then, it can be done at any level of the business, right down into the kind of the weeds of an IT operations or a finance operations or the HR. And you can just scale it up, providing you know which parts of the business you're dealing with. And it went down a storm. And in my current business, I've got a team that does that pretty much day in, day out. And it's probably the most well-respected team that I've got here, second to my security operations center.
Interesting. I think that's, as a takeaway, folks watching, that's got to be one on the list then, because interestingly and coincidentally, maybe uninterestingly, I went to a vendor event, linebacker organisation, and they actually used like a scenario, almost like to be like a tabletop exercise to get the people who came to the event thinking about it. So there was lots of IT folks, one or two partners like myself, partner heads. It was that whole, the anatomy of a ransomware attack with this retail organisation, the problems they faced, and so on and so forth. And I think, to your point, if that's the tipping point, the trigger to get people thinking, that's the beginning of you starting to get that buy-in. So that's a really good shout, Jim. Thank you. I suppose we could maybe move nicely then on to state of industry. I'm going to come back to how I came to be here and stuff in a second. So what's your thoughts on state of cybersecurity industry at the minute? And that's a purposefully open question.
Yeah, such a broad question. The state of the industry, I think it's maturing quite nicely. We've at the business level, we've earned that respect, if you like, that inclusivity now within a business organisation. It's a broad church, as you say, whether you're vendor and provider, whether you're consumer and business, or whether you're somewhere in between. It's an industry that's come together when at times we've been divisive. I've been in those meetings where it's just another vendor pitching to you. Well, how do you even know I've got a problem to solve in this space? My diary isn't managed by, meeting requests with vendors that have got the latest shiny to come and invest in. And I'm smiling there because shiny is definitely your words, mate, for I like them, so I've nicked them. And I think we all kind of share that same ethos in this day and age that, InfoSec is a thing. It's not going away. The government, the UK National Cybersecurity Centre, said a couple of years ago when it was founded, there's no end state to security. So kind of look at that and think you've got to be mad to work in it in whatever context. we've got those dreaded buzzwords that keep driving the marketing of it. But we've got game-changing capabilities now coming to the fore. I'm going to find myself. We operate a £5 penalty in AB Foods if we mention the words AI. So there we go. I'm a £5 already.
Thank you.
But what a game changer! Everybody wants it, and it's a massive accelerator. So how do you secure that when there's no reference model out there because it's so new to market? How do you adopt it cautiously? Do you apply those same principles that you've been practicing for years? Due diligence, no critical information in, validate the answers out, that kind of thing, all coming together. But it's now a mutually beneficial ecosystem. So marketeers might pick up the latest, greatest buzzword, but then get used to it. If I was a diehard, I'd say that traditionally cyber is threats emanating from the internet. That's how it came to be all those years ago.
Yep.
But cyber is the one board level word now that covers the entirety of the information security ecosystem. And our supply chains, our vendors, our partners are all critical to us. When the balloon does go up, we've got to flex. We've got to flex and pull together. So I think the industry's coming along well. It's got no end point. So crikey, what's around the corner, Lord only knows. But right here, right now, we're dealing with some really exciting opportunities. And we're doing that this year, of course, in an election year where there's a lot of disinformation, misinformation, and cyber events happening everywhere. Are we having the opportunistic conversations to say, right, so what happens if that was happening to us? Are we comfortable? Are we confident that we've got the right capabilities, the right partners, the right vendors, the right solutions, all in space to stand us in good stead? We'll see what the rest of the year brings.
Yeah, quite. I mean, a few things there. Unpacking that is the comment about the vendor world. I get the sense that it's calming. I think that's because of the cooling of appetite around investment, therefore throwing crazy money at people who had a half an idea, and obviously sales droids who were just brainwashed. That's kind of, they're all scattering off, and hopefully we'll be seeing a settling and not the nonsense that certainly reached crescendo up until probably last year. So that's one thing. I do sense that there's also a recognition that whilst there's still this kind of supply side and client side, almost like not quite competitive, but this we hate salespeople, you're difficult to get hold of, that's easing a little bit. There's a bit of a spike, I think, in terms of those dreaded initials A&I. But again, ask the average sales droid to explain it and then watch for the vacant stare. Can I have my money, please? Yeah, you're qualified out, mate. Next. I'm going to stay with AI for a second because I was chatting with Christian Toon, who's on the podcast, which people have seen by now. And we also kicked off our podcast series, myself, Colin, and Rue, who's our head of Microsoft practice, kind of bouncing it around. And our consensus was it's just automation with a massive data set. Now, a disservice. But what I've seen and what I've heard from proper podcasts, if you like Risky Biz and others, was that it's really just been used for social engineering at scale. There's not seen any real evidence of it being used in an adversarial role per se. And from blue team, our side kind of perspective, it's just automation to get to the meat of what's happening, but it's still early days. What are your observations on that? What do you think its use, as it were, and the threat?
Yeah, so I presented a couple of sessions for a special interest group, one at BSI, the other at a kind of a big event for them that set up the day. And my research into the space, AI has been around for years. I think it was first coined in the late 1950s. Machine learning came along in the 60s. It then kind of fast forwards a little bit through the 80s and 90s to hit the modern variant of that, which is the kind of the GPT, generative pre-trained transformers. Bringing all of that to life, it's just a tool, right? And we're really good. Whether we sell it, whether we consume it, whether we use it, we're all looking for the tool that will save us time and effort. And generative AI definitely has a clear capability in that space. Of course, we've seen every vendor in the world has now got an AI component. Even Apple, God bless them, are selling the new M4 chip as an AI kind of capable chip. Intel are doing the same thing. Everybody's got an AI component to something. But AI has been around for an awfully long time. So how do we go through that hype cycle? How do we come out the other side of that? Being able to do things quicker, smarter, better, augmenting my physical workforce with a digital twin that is referenceable, that can ingest large quantities of data, but churn out a real quality answer to the problem that you've got, or at least give you a bit more of a starting point so you're not searching through the first 20 pages of a Google search result. I think it's a massive game changer, and just getting out ahead of that, on how to adopt it into business, how to see through the kind of the marketing spiel where if somebody's trying to flog you the latest AI product, but actually it's the same product, but they've just got some new marketing. There's a skill set to that. There's a patience to that. But it's, for me, working in that space, it's built on trust. You and I have known each other long enough now that we're mates inside and outside of work. There's a professional lens and then there's a personal lens where we can have conversations largely around this kind of thing. What do you think about? Have you seen, what are you trying? And that, I think, is the secret to success. So technology is ever changing. There's no end state to security. And everything we do is based on trust, including, the conversations that we have across the broad church of security.
And it's interesting, I guess, just rounding off from that kind of supply and client side, that I think where it's gone wrong is that vendors have tried to accelerate that process. Give me 15 minutes, whatever, completely missing the point that yourself and your peers are very much about trust, and it's something that's over a long period of time, but they're after the quick sell and the quick win. And so the two are just incompatible. So the approach that they're taking to try and engage with you is completely incompatible with the way that you want to engage. And I don't think they still quite realise that yet.
Yeah, I exactly. I think I've seen that sea change definitely happen. You've driven a lot of this yourself with the companies that you've worked for. It is about understanding the strategy, the plan, the opportunities, the qualification of that, and then delivery at an opportune moment, not as a flog and log kind of approach that leaves you with some shelf work.
Yeah, quite. It's not the way to go. So we kind of slid a little into this, so i.e. the threats and challenges going forward. So we've touched on the advance in AI or the availability and how that might take us. But pushing that aside, what do you see as the threats and challenges going forward? You mentioned, for example, we're in election year, so that's perhaps an obvious one, the deep fakes, the potential for that. But any others, or do you think that's the main one?
I think the warning signs are there, aren't they? That, back in the WannaCry days, you do the research around that. And I think there's a very good book on, They Tell Me This Is How the World Ends by a New York Times reporter, that really does a deep dive into the threats emerging from nation states and how Russia used Ukraine as a testbed for a lot of that. My worry is, we're directly attacked. We again understanding who we are as a business, the threat model in food manufacturing and ingredients. Some of the critical partnerships we've got with UK infrastructure in scope for NIS2, that kind of thing. Those things are always going to emerge, but the nation states are very, very good, but you don't know they're happening until they happen. The criminals are a little more forth on the front foot. They will attack to make money. So it's a model I bring forward from my military days. When I was working in that world of counterintelligence, there were 4 things that we largely looked for. There's character traits, for people that could either then be compromising material. We'd look at money, people doing it for money. Are they doing it for ideology? Are they doing it because they're being coerced? Or are they doing it just because they've got an ego? And if you translate that to the world of InfoSec, it's the same drivers. Money, cyber criminals; ideology, nation states; coercion could be anywhere between the two. And then the kind of the ego side of it are the script kiddies, that will have a pop at anybody because they've read something online. They're in a forum or a community that is interested in exploring what they can and can't do with computer systems. And the internet's a big place. Somebody somewhere will give you that opportunity to test your skills if you're the black hat side of the community or a script kiddie side of the community. So by crikey, is it ever moving? Is it ever?
The two for me, one is the polarizing nature of social media and the fact that nefarious nation states could use that to their advantage to disrupt alongside the likes of deepfake. I'm sure we could see that. The other one was teased out on the last interview that I did was around, let's just say, a certain video platform and nation state using it as a mechanism to distract and dumb down the population. Look at this 30-second video, and people not taking up the sciences and the maths, while meanwhile they're trying to do the same. They've done the mass manufacturing bit. IP's gone out the door. Now let's skill up our population and take a 20, 30-year view rather than just the here and now. And we see that balance of power shifting. And I think, to your point, because it's slow and subtle, it's not as obvious as the criminals. People aren't realising that. So, why do mask kids when you're an influencer?
Exactly that, and kind of bringing all of this together in the kind of the emerging threats environment. We've seen phishing and smishing. They're traditional attack vectors, if we can use that phrase in the industry. Moving on now to quishing. Everybody scans a QR code. You can't check into a hotel room without scanning the QR code for the menu these days. So if that can be subverted, that's a problem. And then the most recent one I really like, and I think, oh my God, is where they sample your voice, because you've sat on a podcast and they can sample your voice, and then suddenly they've moved on, and that next contact isn't phishing or smishing. It's a voice message saying in your voice, in your language, in your words, what you want to do to trick somebody into doing something. The deep fakery, as you say. Now, whether that's a video message or a simple voice message, how on earth do our current capabilities mature enough to prevent, detect, report and respond against things like that? Because the human's the weak point of all security models, but they're also the first line of defense.
Yeah. Now, maybe the top tip there is, from here on in, I need to do the podcast in a strange voice. Who cares about me?
Absolutely.
But the would-be prime ministers of countries, as at the time of speaking, well, different story. Maybe they'll try putting on funny voices too, just in case.
Yeah, I'm told in some industries they've reintroduced code words for certain communications. If you get a message and it's unexpected or it's expected, if a particular word is in there or not in there, react appropriately.
Best take back to the military.
So the final piece then, Jim, is anybody you think I should be talking to on a similar vein? Anybody you'd like to suggest, propose? You don't have to, but it's anybody you think's worth talking to.
Oh, you've put me on the spot. The day after I've come back from holiday, Paul, I'm going to push. I guess I'd recommend, the guy I've got a lot of time with is a chap called Martin Smith at the Security Awareness Special Interest Group. If you could have a conversation with him, I think the insights he'd give you over the term of information security coming to be and where it is today. He's a very, very insightful man. He's pretty much acting to all of the sectors and disciplines across the board. Definitely tell you have a look at him. My old CISO here, Linton Olofsson, really, really good character and very personable and very insightful. He's moved on now to Tobacco Company from here as well. But I guess they're the two I'd probably push forward straight away. But I'd encourage you to talk to the people that don't normally do the talking. There is a definite component of the CISO club that do like to be vocal, present, and on camera, and others that don't and just get on and do. What you're doing here is shining a light onto some of those styles, and techniques that have been successful but aren't often demonstrated and celebrated. So cast your net wide, mate. You'll find some superstars.
Funny you should say that. So Linton's in the frame. We've already discussed the agreed in principle, but to the point about the people not often interviewed or talked to, that's exactly what Christian said on the last podcast, that to seek out people who perhaps just quietly get on and do their thing. They don't want that vocal and visible in the CISO circuit. So I've already taken that on board, and I'll be seeking people out and coercing them, dragooning them onto our podcast. But look, Jim, thank you so much again. Thanks for agreeing to do this. I'm sure people got some useful takeaways. Certainly the one about the tabletop exercise I think was particularly useful. So thanks very much again, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you, Paul. See you soon.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you found it insightful. Stay tuned for more of these. There'll be regular ones throughout the year, and you can download the full episode if you wish on the YouTube channel, or you can listen to it on your preferred podcast platform. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.